problem than what any of the young people in the neighborhood are.
Right.
So,
do you have gang activity in North Toledo, or you're talking about LaGrange?
I would assume there's probably some activity going on, whether they're gang or they're gang wannabes. I see some graffiti around every once in a while. I'm in the area right now, and I see very little activity going on. I'm trying to find this one of the side streets that you're talking about. I'm right in the heart of that area, and it's very quiet.
Well, understood. And we should also point out when it comes to gang activity, that comes in all colors, and black gangs kill members of other black gangs, so it's not necessarily against other ethnic groups. It is disturbing, though. The pictures we continue to see here.
Absolutely.
Disturbing. Just to finish the thought, sir, because we're looking at these pictures. It's disturbing to see people going into a building, looks to be a home, doesn't look like it's theirs, and running out in celebration in some cases, looking like they're carrying something with them. It's disturbing to see that kind of activity. But again, as you make the point, that's criminal activity. And then 2 blocks away, if I'm counting right, maybe it's 3, we have some police vehicles and police milling about, and some on horseback that are apparently oblivious to it, and no one's called and reported the looting, or at least they haven't responded to it if they have.
Central in LaGrange, and I see nothing. I mean, I see some people standing around, but they don't even look like they're just standing by the front of a house. But I don't see anything that looks like any gang activity going on. I'm at the corner of Hartman, and driving up and down, I see nothing.
Okay. Fair enough, Councilman. If you could stand by, sir, and perhaps you can find more that's going on around there. And we want to bring in Julie Banderas. She is in our newsroom with the latest information on this. Julie?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to see these pictures and to hear people saying that this isn't a racial war. Clearly, it is a racial war. Clearly, race is at the center of this. As you can see, the people who are ambushing these homes in the midst of this protest are African Americans protesting against these white Nazi individuals who apparently wanted to come out and protest against black gangs who are violent toward white residents in that area. It's interesting, though, I was reading a comment from Keith White. He's a black resident who lives in Toledo, Ohio, rather. He criticized city officials for initially allowing the march, which is interesting because obviously in this country we have the right to protest, and we have these protests and we see them on a constant basis. That's one of the benefits of being an American. You have the right to your freedom of speech and to protest, and in this case a Nazi protest, and they too, whether we agree to it or not, whether we condone what they're exactly protesting, police officers do need to let them speak. But this person, Keith White, this black resident, did say they let them come here and expect this not to happen. And clearly, when we're talking about racism in this country, a very heated protest, no matter where it takes place, in this case in Toledo, Ohio. But Toledo police actually said that the dispute between a black woman and a white man in the north end, in fact, started over a fence. And all it takes is the slightest altercation, and obviously it can erupt into massive violence. It's also interesting to watch as the police officers kind of step back. You know, we see a lot of protests here in New York City on a regular basis protesting the war and what have you. But in this case, they've got hundreds of police officers, though they seem that they're about 100 yards back. Perhaps it's because these protesters are so violent. In many cases, though, more injuries and deaths come out of these protests because police have to take extreme action, physical action with their bully sticks, with their possible mace and also rubber bullet guns. And that is where you basically see more deaths and injuries and more violence. So perhaps they're sitting back. Maybe nobody's in this home right now, and that's the reason why. I've been in the midst of protests in Times Square, for example, where hundreds of thousands of people protested. And as soon as those protesters get really violent, it's interesting to watch how the officers handle it. Those officers were in place. They were ready to take action. Of course, they probably expected this to become a violent protest, considering the nature and the cause of why these people planned this protest. protest, but they will stand back. And as far as I've seen from reporting on several protests, it's for a good reason, obviously. They want to try to keep people as safe as possible. Apparently, the people who had gathered earlier today were taken out in time, so they've been removed. So it seems that now these people just need some time to calm down, and then maybe that's when we'll see more of these police officers actually step forward, because from what we're seeing right now, it doesn't look like anyone's fighting. We've been seeing a lot of people throwing rocks and kicking down doors, but you're not actually seeing physical violence among people. So maybe the police think, hey, you know, let's let these people kind of get it out of their system before we actually go in, because they are obviously overwhelmed. We're seeing hundreds of protesters there who were protesting this Nazi march, but you're seeing many less police officers, so they are outnumbered. And no matter how much police officers are prepared to deal with such massive amounts of protesters, you can only imagine how nasty it could get. And certainly you want to protect the lives of those police officers who put their own lives on the line there in order to protect the community of Toledo and to protect those who are actually kicking down doors. But we are getting word, though, of arrests. In fact, just earlier you were showing some video there of arrests. 6 people were arrested. Police, fire, media vehicles were damaged. So it's a tense situation still unfolding, and it's going to become tense, obviously, for a while now. But, Bob, obviously, this is the sort of thing that is very hard to control, and it could get even more violent. I think that's why these police officers are probably handling it very gently in order to avoid any possible deaths or major injuries and fights to erupt in the midst of this protest we're watching.
Julie, there's obviously racial tension going on here. The point I was trying to make earlier, breaking into that house, I don't know if the house that we saw people going into and taking stuff out of, I don't know who owns it. I don't know if they're white. I don't know if they're Hispanic. I don't know if they're black.
Exactly.
All I know is it's illegal activity. So what started this, obviously, was some racial tension. You have Nazis coming to town, and then you have the largely African-American groups there saying, we don't want you here, and that's when this all started. And we'll continue to follow this story, and you will, of course, as we see some of the debris outside that building where we've seen so much take place here. We will continue to follow that story, but of course this isn't the only story going on in the world right now. Well, actually, let's continue to keep an eye on this. Pat Brosnan is former NYPD. He joins us now, and he's done some anti-riot work. Pat, what are your thoughts when you see all this going on? Oh, well, look at it. Let me point out now, we have a fire in this building. Mm-hmm. It's gone beyond looting. Maybe that comes under the subcategory of looting, but whoever owns this building now is going to have to deal with the fire. So does the fire department respond to this, Pat?
Certainly the fire department responds, Bob, and the thing is it has gone beyond looting, but it's all flowing in the same vein of criminal activity. This criminality is being manifested in the looting, the arson, the assaults, and so on that are occurring, and the police have to maintain control, Bob, and they have to isolate and contain. It's a very, very volatile situation.
Yeah. Now, Julie was suggesting that perhaps police, using some good judgment, I wanted to get your opinion on this, maybe letting some of this anguish dissolve by letting some of the violence go on. That's assuming they know about it. Would they know about something going on, say, 3 blocks away from them and leave it alone?
It's difficult to speculate on what they would or wouldn't know, but I can virtually guarantee you that they will not and cannot, legally or otherwise, statute-wise in that state, overlook any criminal activity, because if any citizen is harmed by their deliberate, which would fall under the terms of malfeasance or misfeasance, where they're just electing to look away, they would be civilly liable and could perhaps even be criminally liable. I can assure you the police are not letting it devolve or to dissipate on its own in any isolated incidents.
Let me give you a picture literally here, Pat. We've got a building now that we've seen looted. Somebody that went in there, apparently, I'm surmising here, set a fire, and now this building is on fire. Now, not only do you have to worry about that building going up in flames, this is in a neighborhood. Now you have to worry about, will that fire go to the next building, and so on. So we don't see any fire equipment on scene yet. I assume we will see some shortly, but this really goes up by, you know, the nth power, because the danger now associated with a fire to this area could be extreme, couldn't it?
Yes, you put it perfectly, Bob. I wouldn't have said it any better. It's exponential. It's the nth power. What happens is they take a life of their own. You put a building off on arson, to make a statement or perhaps as an element or component of a looting or other criminal activity, next thing you know, the block is up. If you look historically at some of the bigger riot situations, thinking of the Rodney King riots and the West Coast a number of years back, you'll see how they take a life of their own and they do grow and take on this exponential growth, which is terrifying. And it becomes almost like a mass hysteria. And in terms of the nightmare element of it, when these fires start going, people are inside some of those occupied residences. They're not all unoccupied commercial weekend locations. And that's where you actually get involved where there's some homicides could possibly occur.
Yeah, so we have people now that are going to find out about this fire who are nearby, and they're going to say, do we have to get out of here? And that can create some tension in and of itself. We might point out that most of the people that we were watching on the video we've been watching over the past hour or so, and I say video, but live pictures, have not been involved in this violence. But somebody went into this building, and now it's on fire. So you have everybody paying the price for that.
Precisely. And you can surmise, as I would surmise, that the fire was not a spontaneous combustion, but was, in fact, a deliberate event, a deliberate arson. Because it would be altogether extraordinarily coincidental that the place went on fire tantamount at the same exact time as that there's a riot unfolding.
I don't know.
And it's surmising that, Bob. I don't know, but it would be statistically probable.
Okay, it looks to me like we have some officers now who have come to that block that we've been talking about and watching for almost an hour. And now the crowd is gone. There are a couple of trucks, police vans that have come up. I assume the fire vans will be here shortly, and they will try to control this fire. It doesn't look horribly windy, but you never know a situation, fires jumping around. Buildings aren't right next to it, but of course, you never know what sparks can catch. There are quite a few trees, though, around this building. So what comes next? I should assume the fire comes in and they'll try to keep this from spreading?
Yeah, they'll try to, the fire department will try to contain it and isolate it so it doesn't spread. And if it is an occupied building, there certainly, incorporates rescue measures to get anybody out that's in there. First, ascertain if it's occupied, because it would be dealt with at a different level if it's confirmed that it's unoccupied. Now,
here we're seeing on our air now some police, and it looks like some may be SWAT team members. I'm not sure about that. I can't see through the trees that they're coming out now, but I believe they're armed, and that may or may not define them as SWAT team, but they're taking control of this area, obviously. They've not got control of the fire, but they
the fire would be a separate department. The fire department would handle that.
Right.
But as well they should. If they don't take control of it, you see time and time again.
Now we see what looks to be, Pat, a couple dozen, some in bright blue shirts, some in the darker, what look to be SWAT team uniforms. I can't see, but I think that's what they are. And it looks like they're making their presence known. Would they walk through a block to let people know they're there?
Absolutely, because the general deterrent effect of the uniformed armed presence would and has deterred any future activity and certainly helps to suppress ongoing activity. Once they know, in other words, that the police are there or a SWAT team specifically is there, people will disperse or at least begin to minimize their criminal activity because they know that the handcuffs and the leg irons are not far behind. You can be certain that there's a zero-tolerance policy in effect right here because this thing will take a life of its own otherwise.
Well, we see none of the crowd that we saw before, now that their presence has been established. And it goes back to the question that I had, is since what it appeared to be police officers 2 or 3 blocks away, you were saying it would not be legal for them to ignore that there was a crime going on.
Correct. It would be,
and I'm going to give you that, okay? I'm going to try to figure out how to ask, is it smart policy to fight a riot by not imposing yourself in areas that may trend toward violence and thereby put your own people in danger?
I understand what you're going for, and I understand your question very, very clearly. And without having more specific detail of what the criminal activity is that's unfolding. For instance, if there's crimes against property, in other words, there's looting, there's a jewelry store being burglarized, yes, conceivably, the greater good for broader society, the greater good for law enforcement and to suppress this might be to allow it to dissipate slowly, overlook that, so that it gets out of the system of the rioters, ideally, and it would help to temper the flames that are beginning to flicker. However, conversely, if there's crimes against people, if there's crimes against individuals, in other words, assaults, rapes, robberies, anything of that nature where it's a bodily crime against another individual, I can assure you that the police will not look the other way, to my experience, which is over 20 years in that business, and also from a civil and criminal standpoint. It flies directly in the face of the state constitution, which has empowered the police in Ohio.
Yeah, and I think Julie has pointed out the point that individuals were not being attacked here. It did look like property was being attacked. Detective, could you stand by for a moment?
Sure.
Thank you. This is a Fox News alert. You're looking at pictures in North Toledo, Ohio, where there appears to have been racial tension that has manifested itself in some looting, ultimately, and criminal activity, which has resulted in a fire, which may or may not put people at risk. You're looking at pictures right now of police officers who have established control of an area in which we saw quite a few, largely, predominantly African-American, what were assumed to be protesters, of an earlier group that were Nazis, that were supposed to have a march protesting black gang activity in this area and its effect on white people in this area. There was violence at that park where that was supposed to start, and consequently there were some arrests made, and that march never did happen. Let's go to Julie Bandera. She's been following this story. She's in our newsroom. Julie?
Bob, yeah, you know, Toledo has been a racial tinderbox for years, and there have been sociological studies on this, and now we're seeing these pictures of racial war, if you will, on these live pictures in Toledo after a crowd that gathered to protest that white supremacist march turned violent. We've been seeing people throwing baseball-sized rocks at police and vandalizing vehicles, media vehicles, having their windows smashed out. But as you've been talking about, we did not see the police presence march in until the crowd started to dissipate. Now, maybe that is to protect themselves and to allow these people to calm and remove themselves. But then you wonder whether many of these people will be arrested for their crimes. They are vandalizing. We don't know of any injuries or anything of that nature, but they are vandalizing. They are ripping through these homes, kicking down doors, breaking windows, and many of them, quite frankly, could get away with it because the police officers didn't seem to really jump in there right away. And of course, there are many reasons why, perhaps because the situation was so tense. There were those 6 arrests. Of course, I'm sure that number is going to climb higher. On the left side of your screen, you're seeing video from earlier when many, many protesters were out there today. Again, that crowd that gathered to protest a white supremacists march. The march, though, was canceled when the violence broke out about a quarter mile away from the park. Now, one black resident, his name's Keith White, he criticized city officials for initially allowing the march. But as we know in this country, we do have that right as Americans. We have the right to protest. We have the freedom of speech that allows us to be American citizens. But this one particular black resident, angry at police officers, angry at officials for allowing them to come here and expect this not to happen. Because as we've been telling you, this is a Nazi march. These are white people protesting essentially against black people. In this case, these are white people who are protesting against black gangs who are violent toward white people. And this is why this all happened. But this was a planned march. This was, you know, a planned thing. You have to get permits in order to conduct a march or a protest of any sort. So everyone knew this was going to happen. There were people in place, not only the people protesting the Nazis, but the police officers who were there in place. And when police officers enter a protest, they are armed. They carry with them weapons in order to divulge from this sort of violence which has erupted. Obviously, the fire we're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen, that's a live picture. That fire was set by protesters earlier today. And if you look to the left of that building, you can see the fire trucks there. So at least now they're starting to douse the flames and put it out. And it seems the fire at this point is condensed to that one building. We haven't seen anyone actually walk out of the building, so we're not quite sure who lives there, if anybody was in there at the time when when those rocks were being thrown at the windows and the sea of protesters attacking that one particular home. It'll be interesting, though, Bob, to find out exactly why they picked that house. We didn't see them attack any of the vehicles per se or one another. There were no fights. There were people just attacking this one particular home. Perhaps
Julie?
People who were living in this home were the target or perhaps at the center of this planned protest.
Julie, I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can.
The information I'm getting now, and I don't know if this is certain, but that may be a tavern rather than a house.
Okay.
And the location at that bar is Mulberry and Central Avenue. And perhaps now, I don't know if that's specifically where this fire is broken out, but that's information I'm getting now across some of our wires, some of our desk efforts in finding out where this is. So you and I look at this, and again, we don't know exactly what's going on, but we're getting this information slowly but surely. On the phone right now, Joe Matthews, former Miami Beach detective and SWAT team member. Joe, as you look at the efforts here, it did look like there were some SWAT team members that came walking down the street to make their presence known. When there is a group of protesters, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, first you have to make sure that they know you're not going to tolerate their behavior. And what probably happened is you have a special events squad that coordinates the protesters as long as they're peaceful. And once it gets out of hand, they would have a secondary group available within minutes to respond to the call. I'm sure that's what's taking place now, and I don't think the city is going to tolerate any kind of behavior that is, like riots or anything like that.
Yeah, we're looking now. It looks like some fire equipment has arrived on the scene there, where apparently a tavern is on fire. We saw looters going in there, coming out with things. It may have been beer, other drinks, and of course now the responsibility of the fire department to put out this fire. It doesn't look like they're actively doing that yet, but it looks like the second floor is fully engulfed, and I guess they want to keep it from spreading to other buildings. Would you guess that to be the case here? Joe? Okay, Joe Matthews, perhaps we lost him. But what we're looking at here looks to be a tavern that was set on fire. People went inside. This all started, as Julie Banderas was telling us about, when some Nazis were planning a march. There were some protesters, and you're looking at the left side of your screen. The march was canceled. There were some arrests made. There was a lot of tension that was going on. Rocks were thrown, arrests were made, and then this occurred. You got a group of people who were slamming into this building. They had knocked down a fence also. There was another building that they appeared to enter and go in, and it looks like looting is going on here, going in. And here, a largely African-American group, and what we want to distinguish is racial tension from criminal activity. They're two different things. It's not illegal to have racial tension. It is to loot a place. So some of these people have apparently looted this building and then gone to another building. And then on the right side of your screen, you're looking at a fire that was set after some other looters went into that building. And, okay, we got Joe Matthews back on the phone. Joe, it must be difficult in these situations. You've worked in Miami Beach. You're going to have racial tension from time to time, but how do you allow that to express itself in some way while not expressing itself in criminal activity such as looting and setting fires?
You have two different types of people that you're dealing with. Those that are legal protesters, that they have a right to protest with a permit, and then you have those that are opportunists. And what you have, the ones that are going into that bar and stealing the booze or doing whatever malicious things that they're doing, are the opportunists. They couldn't care about anything that the city is doing.
This is our history. We've seen this for decades. We know that's going to happen. How do you keep that from manifesting itself in some criminal activity such as looting?
Well, number one, you have to have the manpower to control them. Number two, you have to keep them separated. So you allow them to protest on one side of the street, and then the anti-protesters on the other side of the street with a police barricade between them. The biggest problem, of course, is when they violate that line and fights start. The police have to show a great force to control it. They can't allow them to think that he'd get away with it. And if this first bar was burnt, they will protect the fire department to put it out, and they will try to apprehend those that started it or control it so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, how are you going to find out who set this fire?
Everything is informants. Everybody's going to be talking about it. Everybody's going to be. They're probably young people that are just street thugs. They're going to brag about it. And when things die down, within a day or two, I'll guarantee you they'll find out exactly who started it and why they started it.
Now, we had a Nazi march that was planned. And when you're talking about manpower, I'm sure you anticipate a certain response to that. So you're going to say, okay, we need a certain number of uniforms to establish themselves in this area so no violence breaks out there. But what we're looking at here, Joe, is the violence broke out a few blocks from there. How do you plan for that? And is that something that you anticipate?
Absolutely anticipated. What you do is you plan on and see the minimum amount of personnel you need to control a peaceful protest. Then you double that just in case it turns out not to be peaceful. Then you have your SWAT teams and your special forces available on call where they respond within 15, 20 minutes, a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you that's what's taking place now. They're putting everything in order. Everybody's trained. Everybody has the equipment available to them. It's just a matter of being called and responding. And then the officers that are at the immediate area right now try to maintain control until the force gets there.
Okay.
Once the force gets there, they take complete control of the area.
Well, they do. They certainly establish themselves in that area where the fire is shortly after the fire broke out. The only thing that I've been wondering about is why they didn't establish their presence before that.
Well, sometimes if you have too much of a presence of police, it kind of instigates problems. So it's a very thin line. You have to make the people feel comfortable in their legal protest based on the fact they got a permit and they're doing it right. You have to have enough officers there to maintain peace, but not to make it look like a police state where you're intimidating everyone. So the police are there in the background. God forbid it gets out of hand. Now, what you may see now is they started a fire 2 blocks maybe to the north of that location, and they may go 2 blocks, to the south, just to create a bigger problem and get more people involved. The more people that are going to get involved, these opportunists, and it gives the real criminals an opportunity to steal and loot.
Yeah, and that's what it is, criminal activity. Joe, can you stay with us for a moment?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to Julie Banderas, who's been following this. Julie?
Yeah, I'm just getting more information in on how this whole thing started and exactly how police did manage to disperse all those people, because as you notice now, the protesters that we were watching just moments ago kicking down those doors and throwing rocks into the windows into that random building they apparently picked a bar there, obviously abandoned now, engulfed by flames, firefighters working on that. But police did use tear gas in order to break up the rock-throwing crowd that had gathered to protest a planned march we've been talking about today by the National Socialist Movement. This march, this protest was a planned one. And so basically to protest this protest, if you will, 20 different educational, religious, and community groups had organized their own rally. So you've got 2 different protests. One, you've got these white Nazis who are apparently demonstrating against black gangs that were harassing white residents. Then on the other side, you have the educational, religious, and community groups that had organized their own rally and hope to take the steam, if you will, out of a neo-Nazi march going on through the North Toledo neighborhood. That, of course, was canceled, though, as soon as this violence broke out about a quarter mile away from the park along the planned route. So those Nazi protesters got out of there, and then, of course, you see the majority of the African-American protesters who were upset, obviously, about their planned protest, upset with the police officers who allowed this protest to continue, expecting that some sort of racial war would break out. That's when they started attacking that one particular building that we saw looting and the violence, of course, erupting in that sense. So that, as you mentioned, Bob, that is breaking the law. Of course, the racial war, though, I said it before, I mean, Toledo has been a racial tinderbox for years. Sociological studies have proven this. So, you know, you've got the lethal combination of poverty, unemployment, and unrest. And when you combine those together, a lethal combination as a whole. And this video is pretty incredible to watch. I mean, these people. But it's interesting to note that they are not attacking one another. They're attacking buildings. And perhaps that is why the police officers did choose to stand back, because no one was physically being harmed. And to jump into a scenario like this, you could potentially do more harm than good. But again, in order to break that crowd up, because this here that you're seeing happened earlier, now the crowd has been dispersed thanks to the police officers who stepped in. They used tear gas to break up the rock-throwing crowd. So it seems that most of the violence is over now. Now it's just a matter if we could go back to the live pictures of the firefighters who now have to douse the flames. These protesters had set afire a second-story building at a bar, apparently, that was on the corner there of Mulberry and Central Avenue, which was just about a couple blocks, though, from where the original protest was scheduled. So it seems that the situation is certainly calming down. Now what happens to all those people, though, that did loot and did violate and did break into that building? They're breaking the law. Whether or not the police officers will actually catch up to all of them involved, probably not a good chance of that, although we are getting reports of dozens of arrests. Perhaps more will follow. But tracking them down once they've already dispersed and ran off into various corners of the city is going to be a tough one for these police officers to handle, Bob.
Thank you very much, Julie. Let's go to Ken Pence, a former Nashville Police Department member of the police department and also former SWAT control trainer. So, Ken, when you come upon a situation that we've seen here, with some violence that broke out, do you make a decision whether to engage or not, or if you're aware of it, you must engage?
Well, what you have to do is wait till you have sufficient force to control the crowd. If they'd gone in too early, it would have escalated the situation. If they'd gone in much, much later, it would have already escalated. I think they did actually pretty good job. You have to have enough force to disperse the crowd. You want to have, and there are ratios that the police are aware of, that when you go in, you know, you don't want to go in, 20 to 1 protesters against police, and you don't want to use excessive force because that would just escalate the situation also.
When you plan for a situation like this in which you have Nazis who are racist and creating some tension, blacks who come to respond to their protest, who also are anguished and angry, do you plan the racial makeup of the uniformed people that you have on hand to make it diverse enough so that people see it's not all white, it's not all black?
No.
You do not. You have a certain number of people.
No, you don't have time for that. You are going in as professional officers. You have to treat everyone with respect. They have the right to protest. When they get violent, the police have sections, especially SWAT would be trained to go through the police line, snatch people out who are more violent than the others. Because everybody in the crowd is not as violent. You have instigators, and they're going to be standing back behind the milling crowd and egging people on. And those are the ones that the SWAT team would go in, pull out, and arrest. And they can, if property crimes, they can always arrest them later.
Right.
That's fine.
And Ken, that's an excellent point. I don't know if we can re-rack some of our, well, we've done that some, but you use a great term there, the milling crowd. The milling crowd. We saw a lot of people who were milling about, and, maybe two dozen people who were very active in what appeared to be looting. And then the consequence here, the video, we see this, what we understand to be a tavern, a bar on Mulberry and Central.
Oh, sure.
Set on fire. And, what's the aftermath of this? I mean, other than the criminal activity and you try to find out who did it, the bar owners obviously are losing a lot here. Does this create more racial tension?
Well, when you destroy a bar, it's going to destroy a congregation place. I mean, it's not like a sole source of food or a grocery store in the area. Now, that's a little bit more. Bars
Right. That's a little different. That's a point well made. Ken Pence, thank you very much, sir, for educating us on this whole process. Again, we're looking in North Toledo, in which there had been some looting that resulted after a clash of some Nazis and protesters against those Nazis. We will continue to follow this story. Stay with us. We've got more coming up.
Your weather, Fox News.
I love this one. This man finally popped the question.
You like it?
Oh, it's so beautiful.
But his Visa card was over the limit.
I'm so sorry. There seems to be a problem.
His fiancée told him to call American Express.
Okay, this one's so cool. A Gold Card member wanted a special gift for his wife's birthday.
No.
So I got him tickets through Gold Card events for the concert of the year before they went on sale.
Got him.
Call 1-800-THE-CARD and apply now for the Preferred Rewards Gold Card.
I helped a card member redeem points to get into the Richard Petty driving experience. She said she always wanted to live life in the fast lane.
With the American Express Preferred Rewards Gold Card, you get all this and more. Call 1-800-THE-CARD and apply now and experience a world of service.
ProPower in Bellevue is the area's official full-line Ventrac dealer, and we have the equipment that's right for you. Hustler Zero Turns, Honda Power Generators, and Salzco Chipper Shredders. Ventrac is built to last.
Whether you're bringing in old reliable or in for a new Ventrac or Hustler product, we offer free pickup and delivery on all units serviced and sold by us. If you should ever need parts for your Ventrac, come on in. We're open early, we'll stay late, and deliver.
Experience the power with ProPower. Call today for a free demo.
Come see us before you buy, Country Heart Center.
When I dream.
When I listen.
When I learn to be responsible.
Successful.
Prepared.
Knowledgeable.
I can do anything.
Fireman. Science.
Business.
Language art.
I play soccer.
Math. Music. I love the people. I like to draw.
The small size.
The playground.
Diversity.
Good teachers.
Best friends.
Freedom. You shouldn't be afraid to learn.
Open house for grades 6 through 12 on Sunday, November 6th from 1 to 3 p.m. Maumee Valley Country Day School. Individual focus, personal excellence.
I love it here.
This is a Fox News alert. This was one of the arrests that was made in North Toledo after a planned demonstration by Nazis became violent when largely African-American protesters showed up to protest that planned march. That march didn't happen. Then there was a group, largely a milling crowd, but then some who went in and looted some stores in what looked to be a tavern that was also set on fire. Now there is police department on hand, and they are putting out that fire. Again, this is North Toledo, Ohio, and at one time 150 police officers at the scene. All of this starting when there was a planned Nazi march. Again, that did not happen, but racial tension manifesting itself in North Toledo, Ohio. We'll continue to follow that story. Well, think pink, folks. There's a reason for all the pink ribbons and messages you've been seeing everywhere. This is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. 1 in 7 American women will suffer from that disease, but there are some things you can do to try to prevent it or treat it. Fox News medical contributor Dr. Manny Alvarez is here to explain. 1 in 7.
Yeah.
That's a high number.
Well, it is important. This month is very important because breast cancer, as you said, kills a lot of women. Over 200,000 cases are diagnosed every year, and it's the leading cause of death for women between 40 and 55. So it is very important to be tested and become aware, because the importance of breast cancer is if you pick it up early in the game, it has a survival of 90%. So it is important for women to become aware of how to pick up the disease, especially younger women. Do self-breast examinations is very important. Women after 40 should have a mammogram at least once every other year, and definitely after the age of 50, one should have a mammogram.
Now, the numbers, from what I understand, are that more white women will get breast cancer, but black women, when they get it, are more prone to die from breast cancer. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think it all has to do with, we have a little bit of a racial divide in access to health care, and I think that this is an important message. It is important, preventive health care should be across race, and it's important, especially for Hispanic women, black women, to be aware that they should get their mammogram, that they should go to the doctor prospectively. There should be education so that they learn how to self-examine themselves in order to pick up breast cancer.
And if you're African American, don't think that just others get it.
Absolutely
Make sure
not.
that you
really,
take
as a
care of
matter of fact, breast cancer affects men. I mean, we can get breast cancer, and there's always over 1,600 cases of diagnosed breast cancer in males, and over 400 to 500 people die a year. So this could affect us too.
Okay, let's take a look at an email that we have for Dr. Alvarez. My mother is a 51-year-old and has begun taking hormonal replacement therapy. Is there any risk of developing breast cancer or another type of cancer? Thank you, and that's
and Central. Some police officers and even some innocent bystanders have been hurt in all this. Toledo Police Chief Mike Navarre is scheduled to hold a press conference momentarily. Now, we're still getting ready. Our Heather Miller is there. Now, they are still getting ready for that. But our own Mert Price, he was actually out there on the scene. He says he has a cousin in North Toledo. We're going to go now to Mert. Mert, can you tell us just a little bit about what you saw when you were out there?
Well, Tiffany, I have several cousins that live in the area, and I've covered a lot of stories in my career so far. Here at Fox, since I've been here, I've covered a lot, but I've never seen anything like this. When we first announced that the Nazis were going to make that march through the area, I never imagined a sight like this. I mean, I was down the street, and I saw people turning over cars. When we saw the video a second ago of people running into that bar, people were looting the bar. They were knocking out windows. Cars were still, and what surprised me, cars were still coming up the street. People were coming to see what was going on, and I tried my best to talk to a couple of people, and several other people were out there telling people to turn around and go back. This was not something that they wanted to be a part of. I mean, it was just terrible. And then, I don't know if you have the video, but the looters began set the building on fire, that bar on fire, and it began burning. And what's so dangerous about that is the crowd was so unruly. They had bricks, and they were throwing bricks at any cars that were coming through that area. And what was so dangerous, I was wondering in my mind, and so were other bystanders, whether or not the fire department was going to be able to get in there and put that fire out. The houses are so close that it seems like if that fire started to spread, it would be a lot more dangerous situation than it would be otherwise. And the police seemed to be standing back. It seems like they were grouping, because I saw several officers and people get into clashes. I saw several officers getting beat up, hit with bricks, just innocent, just like you said earlier. People that were just driving through were getting attacked and beat up. It was just, this is something that looks like the LA riots, something maybe from another country or something like this. People were looting. This was just, I've never seen anything like this.
Right. Mert, I mean, could you just express the overall mood out there? I know you've gotten the opportunity to talk to plenty of people out there. Can you just describe the overall mood? How are people in this neighborhood doing right now? I mean, are they terrified?
People are most definitely scared. Everybody that I talked to out there said that they knew that probably there would be trouble by allowing the Nazis to march through this neighborhood. But the people that I talked to say they never They never imagined they never would have thought something like this happened. A lot of them said this looks like some of the Eyes on the Prize videos that you saw, the civil rights movement and struggles back in the day, the type of rioting and the type of crowd reaction and things like that.
Okay, Mert, thank you very much. Thank you, Mert. Now, our Heather Miller, like I said, she's been out there on the scene as well, working all of this story, seeing a lot of this go down. Now, do we have Heather on the phone right now? Okay. Heather, could you tell us what's going on right now at this press conference? That's where you are right now. What's going on there?
Actually, Tiffany, Mayor Ford, Chief Navarre, Sheriff Hill, they all walked in right now. The press conference is beginning here momentarily.
Okay. Is there any way, Heather, you could tell us just a little bit about what you saw before this press conference does get underway? Could you tell us a little bit about what you saw out there as you were reporting the story?
Tiffany, can you hear me all right now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Heather?
I was just making sure. Yes. Out there, it was almost unbelievable because as you'd think things would be calm, violence would erupt in another location. There were little pockets erupting here and there, and then that's when they all began looting. This has actually been going on since about 20 after 11. It really escalated about noon. Actually, Tiffany, I don't know if we can get a live picture right now. Mayor Ford is at the podium right now getting ready to speak.
Transfer you now. No, we can't.
And right now, this is a press conference. You see here Mayor Jack Ford and Police Chief Mike Navarre. They're getting ready to address this situation right now. Just once again, we want to tell you there is an uprising in North Toledo. Cars being damaged, homes being damaged, people being injured, police officers injured. I know tear gas was used in many situations. Even our own news vehicle, both of those were damaged in this whole incident. We're just going to go ahead and give you a quick background. That 2 weeks ago, the Nazis, they planned to march in North Toledo. They say because the black gangs were targeting white people in that neighborhood. There was a media briefing this morning at 8:30. Now, groups were also getting together at Wilson Park and Woodward at about 10:30 this morning. The march wasn't scheduled to happen until about noon. Now, police did cancel that march. We also have some video. I don't know if we have it here, but okay.
Short notice. As you know, we had the march today. The march itself was canceled based on Chief Navarre's assessment that there were too many anti-march protesters, and he felt it was getting out of hand. And I had talked about that ahead of time, that would be the appropriate action. He took that action. Subsequent to that, a group of mostly men in the community or for perhaps adjacent communities began to mass in groups. When the police went to deal with them, they would disperse, then they would mass back. At a certain point, they began to gather at one intersection. We went down to talk with them. Most of them were gang members. They were in full colors. Several had hoods on. There were some threats made. We tried to talk with them. Their anger was based on some long-standing things, but also the fact that we had allowed the walk to occur in the first place. And then the fact that they were moved away to allow the marchers to go to the streets. Go to the walkways. After we talked with them, we discussed it again, and I noticed a building had been broken into. It was a bar. They had set it afire. We then we stopped all discussion, and the dispersal was done by our police. They've done that. We were concerned over the next few days, and that's why I asked these leaders to come here to work with any contacts you have in that community to talk to folks to get this thing settled down. We are going to be obviously up all night and all day till we get to the right point in this, but we need leadership. Any questions for me or for any of the folks who head up organizations in the community?
I have a question, Mayor. Were there any outside individuals involved in the group that's causing the problem? Were there people from outside of this community, to your knowledge?
I did not see anyone that would give me any signal that they were outside. They were not youth. There were youth there. That was another concern. There were women and children in this group. I talked to a couple toddlers who were there, and that was another reason why I was concerned about how it would play out. But these were mostly adult men, in their 20s, clearly gang members, and they let you know that, but that's who it was.
Mayor Ford, you mentioned that this anger was based on some long-standing situations. Can you describe those situations for us?
Just some grievances about being stopped and different things that had happened to them. And the problem was it was about, I don't know, at any given point, 10 or 15 voices hurling accusations. So when you tried to respond, it was very difficult. I would like to salute Mansour Bey and Joe Walters and Chief Bell and Alan Bannister, who walked into the crowd with me. That was a lot. I appreciate it.
What is the current situation now in North Toledo?
There's been the crowd has been dispersed. We have a lot of officers up. Asked for 50 highway patrol officers to come up to supplement our officers. We're going to be up there as long as we have to be to keep things in control.
Any idea if there'll be a curfew this evening in that section?
I am announcing that there'll be 8 p.m. First, I have to declare a state of emergency, and we're doing that. And then we will have a curfew at 8 p.m. That doesn't mean people can't get in their cars or they can't go to games, but we're talking about folks roaming around the streets and alleys and so forth.
And if you do find people who are walking the streets, what will happen to them?
My guess in that area, they will be stopped and asked what's going on. And that is our major focus there.
Do you have any idea on the number of arrests?
Chief will be up in a minute. He can share that with you.
Mayor Ford, I have to ask you this. Is this not what the Nazi Party wanted to happen?
That's exactly what they wanted. And last night, I was at a church event. There were, I think, 2,000 people there at Friendship Baptist, and we made an appeal for folks to stay home and ignore it, and the crowd really responded. And then I've spent some time driving around talking to smaller groups of youngsters, but it was a somewhat of a spectacle today. People were, I saw grandparents bringing their grandchildren to stand on the corner to see the march go by. It was almost like a parade atmosphere. And we talked to a few and said, be cool, or why don't you just go back in the house? And they said, well, I just want to see it. But it really was the gang members that took advantage of the situation, in my estimation. I did talk to them, said I'd be willing to meet with them to discuss any legitimate grievances, but they were not interested in that.
How do you think the city could have better prepared for
The chief put in inordinate amount of preparation. The sheriff was there. We had other jurisdictions We could not stop them from walking on the sidewalk. We had indicated we would not give them a permit to march in the streets, but we could not stop them from, like any other citizen, walking down the sidewalk.
Was there any trouble in getting them to leave?
I'll let the chief speak to that, but I think the answer is no, but he'll speak to that.
Mayor, was this more just plain vandalism or criminal activity than race relations, you think?
I don't think it was race relations at all. I think it was some gang members who had real or imagined grievances and took it as an opportunity to speak in their own way over the march and what they consider to be their park and their area.
Mayor, are you disappointed in the citizens of Toledo?
No, I'm disappointed that some folks who clearly are not strong citizens to begin with took this opportunity to make this statement. I was chagrined that there were obvious mothers and children in the crowd with them. Several intimated that they had guns, and so, you know, we're trying to deal with several issues at the same time.
Mayor Ford, there's going to be an entire nation that will see this tonight on the nightly news. What would you like to say to those people who've never been to Toledo and this is their first impression of our city?
Well, I don't think it'll be their first impression. People know what Toledo's all about. We had a protest walk. We canceled it. Some elements in our community took it as an opportunity to deal with other concerns they had. We tried to talk with them, particularly in light of the youngsters in the crowd. At a certain point, the dispersal command had to be given.
Are you guys going to be doing anything differently after dark besides the curfew?
And the chief will deal with that first.
Well, Mayor, has LaGrange Development Center had anything to say about this or their comments concerning the situation, whereas basically up under their jurisdiction?
This is beyond what you would expect a community development corporation to do. And by the way, I think Ramon Perez, who works for LaGrange, also walked into the group with me. And he is a street worker in that area, and he was deeply concerned by the level of hostility by the gang leadership toward our police and in the whole picture.
Mayor Ford, where do we go from here? How do we help this city heal from this?
My hope is that some of the folks that are assembled here and others that you know, they only had an hour or so to get here, but I appreciate you showing up, to talk with folks you know in that neighborhood. Obviously, we have pastors from Spring Street and from True Vine Church, which are two big churches in that area, to talk about this tomorrow morning. And we need to send a message to the community to cool out. And if there are some grievances that need to be addressed, we'll do that in the proper way.
Yes,
Chief, would you?
Yes, one question. I'm a journalism student. I want to know, do you know why, and you know, they chose Toledo, and specifically this area, to come in? Because historically, you know, Nazis usually look, or the German, you know, regime back then and everything, pretty much targeted Jewish people, Jewish communities, and you know, black people, not necessarily Polish people. I never really had beef with that. So why Toledo, of all the places out in America, and specifically the Polish, area, and this particular day? What's the, specifics for that?
Well, there is a large march going on in Washington today, and there may be some connection. But I think my own opinion is that someone from Toledo contacted this group and negotiated their visit here, and exactly what happened is what they wanted to happen. If you know, well, I'm not saying any names at this point. We'll look at that because there is a large bill that someone is going to have to pay. But if you know that area, that is a beautiful area that goes around Wilson Park and even on down the street. So it is not a neighborhood where you have a lot of friction in the first place. So this was based, in my opinion, on I believe, a small dispute, and that's my opinion. Chief?
Sure. Toledo Police Chief Mike Navarre now taking the podium.
This was a unified effort by the Toledo Police Department, the Lucas County Sheriff's Office, Fire Chief Michael Bell standing behind us, was with us in the planning process. We had state agencies and federal agencies. And we had approximately 150 officers deployed today. We thought we were well equipped and well manned to face any contingency. Up until about 12 noon, we pretty much got what we expected. We did expect problems. We did see a lot of problems. Our officers used considerable restraint. They were rocked and bottled for several hours. We held our line. At 12 noon, I made the call, consulted with the sheriff. He concurred to cancel the rally. Things are getting out of hand. They're getting out of hand very quickly. We had a number of police vehicles that were damaged. There was a fire truck that had a windshield broken out. We had officers injured. We had firefighters injured. I don't have any of those totals for you. That's not what this press conference is about. We've made about 24 arrests. Quite frankly, we could have made a couple hundred arrests easily. The officers used considerable restraint throughout the entire day. We were faced with a situation between noon and this hour now where a group was growing very quickly. At the first estimate, I was told there were like 60 people in this group. At one point, it was estimated to be over 600 people. As the mayor told you, an attempt was made to negotiate, and it looked like there was going to be some success with those negotiations. They, before we could even get a proposal back to them, what we were willing to agree to, they broke into a business and set it afire. At that point, we had to move. Things were getting out of hand. We had our arrest teams in place, and that happened probably about 45 minutes ago where we moved in. We made a lot of arrests. I don't know what the numbers are, but I suspect it's going to be somewhere close to 30 or 40 arrests before this is over. The crowd has temporarily dissipated, and that's a good sign. But we're going to have problems here. We're going to have problems for the next few days, and as the mayor said, that's why you're here. That's why we ask you to be here. You can do that portion of it a lot better than we can as law enforcement. We need you to communicate with these individuals or anyone that you have contact with that can communicate with these individuals and explain to them that, yeah, we know they have their grievances, but there's a proper forum, there's a proper way to express that and try to reach some resolution. And we're willing to work with them and do whatever we can. We don't want this to continue any longer. There will be a very strong police presence in this neighborhood for several days, for as long as it takes. The sheriff is committed to helping us for as long as we need him to. We did ask the State Highway Patrol to send in some troopers. They offered assistance. We gladly accepted those assistance. We've recalled just about every officer on the police department right now. The rest of the city is taken care of. We've got officers responding to calls for service. We've got detectives in uniform doing that portion. Sheriff, do you want to jump in here?
I just want to say, one of our major missions, our major goals when we started planning for this was not to get anybody hurt. We wanted to keep everybody as safe as we could. So far, I don't know if any of the demonstrators have been hurt. I don't think anybody's been hurt. There's been a couple fire people hurt and some police officers, minor injuries. And our goal continues. We don't want to get anybody hurt. And that's why we're asking for the help of the community. You know, please call in your favors or whatever, you know, to try to get these kids to go home and get off the streets. And we don't want anybody hurt. We don't want to lock them up. We don't want to put them in jail. We just want them to go home and behave. So
Sure.
Anything you can do for us, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Only thing I would add, these are not kids. These are young men. I was as close to them as I am close to you. And they're not kids. I want to emphasize that.
When you get as old as I am, they're all kids. They're all kids.
Chief Navarre, if I may, we heard from several of the counter-protesters saying that the police were there solely to protect the Nazis and not them. They were upset by what they felt aggression by the police officers using horses to move them back, trying to get them to disperse at right around the 11:30 hour when the rally hadn't even started yet, and there was some verbal exchanges, confrontations going on between the groups. How would you address those concerns from the people who were in that area this
Our objective
afternoon?
today was to protect everyone, to protect the protesters, the National Socialist Movement marchers, the counter-protesters, which comprise several groups, and I guess most importantly, the neighbors, the residents, the families, the children. We don't want to see anyone getting hurt. We had a responsibility to protect the marchers. As distasteful as that sounds, we have a legal responsibility to do that. The officers used considerable restraint. They took a lot of rocks, they took a lot of bottles for a long period of time before the very first person was arrested.
Chief, did you consider barricading off a wider area of streets? I mean, just completely barricading off the whole neighborhood so that there couldn't have been all these crowds coming through, these spectators?
And that's what was done when the Ku Klux Klan came a few years ago. It was just an area, one of the courthouses or something. They had an area restricted.
I will tell you with certainty, if we had to do it over again, we'd do some things different. We felt pretty strongly or pretty confident that we had a pretty good perimeter set up around the original area. What happened was the rally was supposed to take place on the basketball court near the swimming pool. That rally actually took place on Stickney Avenue. That was something that we had to deal with. We tried to move them out of there as quickly as we can once things started going bad. We were successful. We were very firm. We moved them out of there. We got them over to the basketball court. That's when the crowd shifted, went to Central and Mulberry. That's when things got real bad. And that's when we made the decision to call it at that point. It was in the middle of their press conference. They were very angry about that, but that's okay. They were given an order to get in their cars and leave. And they did that in about 3 minutes. We got them out of there.
Chief, could you discuss your plans tonight for security, and are you guys going to be checking IDs to determine, people coming into the neighborhood if they actually live there and to try to keep people out?
Well, the principal component of the security plan is the curfew that the mayor announced. It's an 8 o'clock curfew. We're going to enforce that. We're going to have enough officers down here to enforce that. We will not just arrest people without warning. We will find out what they're doing, give them an opportunity to comply with the curfew, because many of them won't know about it. But once they are given that opportunity to comply, they are going to have to comply or we're going to arrest them. There's going to be a very heavy presence. We're going to set up a command post in this building where you're at right now, and that command post will remain open 24 hours a day for the next several days until we deem it necessary to shut it down.
Chief, are you fearful that this group may return?
We anticipate, the Nazi group, no. The Nazi group's not going to return. They're out of town and they accomplished what they were here to accomplish. Most of the counter-protesters, like the ISO people and the skinheads, I think they're long gone. I don't anticipate any problem with them. The problems I anticipate are with the crowd that the mayor talked about the crowd that he addressed earlier, the young men. We expect some real problems tonight.
Are you telling neighbors it's safe to go back in, or are you still asking them to stay out for now?
I don't think we ever ask neighbors to leave the area. If there are people out on the street, we advise them to go back into their houses or to leave the area. If people ask us what they should do, we said it might not be a bad idea to go someplace else. It's such a large venue, there's not really a specific area that's deemed unsafe. We just have a lot of community unrest right now in a very large area encompassing, a couple square miles.
What's the area of the curfew?
It's a citywide curfew. Yes.
Chief, these people that were arrested, are you aware? Were they from Toledo or?
I can't answer that. I don't have those demographics. I know a lot of the group that lingered on for several hours were from Toledo. A lot of them were gang members from Toledo.
You mentioned that the Nazi group was obviously angry when you asked them to leave. Speaking to them after, they blame the police. They say that it was a lack of you listening to them and how this should have gone down. Do you respond to that? They claim that it was the lack of police response to their, how they know how to do this for this.
Well, quite frankly, I don't listen to too much that group says, because for the last 10 days, all I've heard is propaganda and untruth from that group. I don't really give them the time of day. There was no room for negotiation. Once it was called, they were either going to get in their car and leave the area immediately, or they were going to go to jail.
Chief, how long is the curfew? Tonight, tomorrow, all week, or a couple of days?
I would say tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday for sure, and we'll reassess it at that point.
And what was it the group didn't do? What didn't they abide by that they had agreed to abide by?
Well, they gathered and conducted a rally on Stickney Avenue, right at the, inside of our perimeter. We had a location that we had agreed to that was clearly inside the perimeter, away from any counter-protesters. We anticipated the problems along the parade route, but we did not expect that rally, if you will, an impromptu rally, to occur on Stickney Avenue. And it happened, and we let it go a little bit longer than we probably should have. But I don't think that would have prevented any of the problems from occurring.
Since a lot of these counter-protesters were under the impression they are gang members, is there a gang problem here in Toledo?
I've always said that we have problems in Toledo. Toledo is not like any other urban city similar in our size. We have problems. We try to deal with those problems. That particular neighborhood is a relatively quiet neighborhood. It doesn't have a lot of the problems that were being characterized in some of these press releases you saw from the NSM. They were receiving a lot of inaccurate information from a couple of individuals. And as a result of that information, they picked Toledo, Ohio to stage a rally.
Will you go after those individuals who gave them some, what you call, false information?
A lot of it is subjective in nature, and it's one person's perception of a problem.
Mayor Ford, you mentioned there is a bill to be paid. Will you search out the people who are responsible? How do you plan on dealing with that aspect of this?
Well, it'll be very difficult to connect what I think happened and who brought the group in to liability for all the officers, number one. And that's really all I have to say. It'll be very difficult to make that connection. We will look at it, and if we can make that connection, then we will pursue that, but it's very doubtful.
Chief Navarre, there were several TV cameras, of course, all over the place, taping some of the counter-protesters, breaking the law, throwing rocks, things like that. Will you be looking to perhaps look at that videotape to make arrests?
Yes.
Excuse me, Chief. My understanding, there was a group, I'm not familiar with a lot of the counter-protesters, but I know that the gang members were in their colors. And I had a granddaughter that was in that area, so I did go to try to get her. And I was encountering this group with, and they were not African-American. I saw a few, they were not the Nazi group. This group had black bandanas on, and they were in all black, and they were not African-American. I also saw them standing directly with the Bloods, as you call them. And this group was really working these young guys up, and I don't know them by name, but some of the Bloods. Okay, there's the other group with this black and white. And they were right with the one of the gangs. And even one of the young men from the gang said, would you all just calm down? You're going to get us killed. And it was this group that I saw in that area that really worked these young men and women. They agitated it on, and even some of the gang members asked them, would they calm down? And these were this group that had the bandanas on, and they had sticks. And who are they, and where did they come from?
There were a number of counter-protest groups that arrived here. A lot of them came from out of state.
Okay.
One of the largest groups was the International Socialist Organization, the ISO. And the intelligence that we received, that's exactly what they do.
And they did.
They come into town in these types of rallies, and they get people riled up. That's a very common technique.
But we think they left pretty close to when the
Yes.
the socialist movement people left. And then what they left behind was all these kids agitated and riled up. And
I even talked to one, I don't know who he was, and I said, you know, just, he said, I'm going to get my group and go home. I said, go home. Don't, this is what they want, you know, gather up your little group and go. And he said, all right, all right. And he went in one direction, and hopefully they did go home. But I just saw them just really agitate and edge them on, and then just disappear.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments? Yeah, Leanne.
This is a crisis, and we are reacting to a crisis, but we're going to have to live here beyond and past this particular period. I know that this may appear to be a horrific situation, and it has brought a negative vein or a negative eye on our city. But we have to understand that those young people that may be angry may be justified in being angry. They have nothing to do and no place to go. So I am saying this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us that is sitting in this room to open up our doors, to ask all of the people in this city to come out and give something back to these young people. They have nothing to do. Everything is locked up. The hoops is locked up. If they want to go swimming, they got to pay to swim. I don't care what it is. And when people are poor and downtrodden, and when these young kids come out of their homes, they said if 5 of them gather on their street, they're made to seem like they are in a gang and they're accosted. We have to sit down and listen to them. You know,
the Tucson SU field
is going to be over as soon as this is over. We need to give them a number to call. They need a number to call, and they need somebody on the other end of that phone like crisis intervention to hear what they have to say, why they are doing what they do, and actually what it is we can do to help them be productive citizens. Now, I think that that's only fair to these young people. We look at these young people the same way as we do the Nazis before the Nazis came. We don't want them in our neighborhood. We don't want them congregate. We don't want them congregating. We don't want them doing anything.
All right, that is a live news conference happening in North Toledo neighborhood right now, where a major disturbance broke out around noontime today in the area of Bronson and Dexter Street. Mayor Jack Ford talking there along with the Lucas County Sheriff and Toledo Police Chief Mike Navarre. They have made a couple dozen arrests because of that disturbance, but the police chief, as you heard him, said they could have made 200 arrests. All of this started off with a small group of counter-protesters in protest of that neo-Nazi group that had planned to march here. Police had to cancel that because of what they feared could break out, and it actually did. They estimated that at one point about 600 individuals in the crowd mostly adult men, but some women in the crowd out there protesting, throwing rocks, eggs. A few police officers injured, a couple of firefighters as well. A number of police units damaged because of this. As you could see, the ambulance that you saw traveling through one of those neighborhoods just beaten to death with what looks like it was rocks and large bricks. They said this is going to be a problem in the next few days. The police chief, Mike Navarre, also mentioned that plans for security in the next few days, or however long this takes before we can resolve the issues here, a curfew as of 8 p.m. tonight. They're asking community leaders to make contact with people in this neighborhood, the North Toledo area of Bronson, Dexter Streets, to talk to some of these gang members, some of the residents in the area, talk to them about resolving these issues. They said this was not the time to go ahead and make these public, that they can be resolved. There is going to be a strong police presence in these neighborhoods that we mentioned for the next several days, maybe for however long it takes. That's what Chief Navarre said. We also wanted to mention a couple of homecoming dances supposed to have taken place tonight. We talked to a couple of principals. That is Central Catholic High School and Start High School. Both of those had planned to have their homecoming dances tonight. Those have canceled because these schools are located in that area. We're going to continue to have live team coverage of this, and on our regular scheduled newscast coming up at 7 o'clock, that's after the CBS and SEC football game. So make sure you stay tuned to WTOL News 11. Thanks for joining us.
Stay with WTOL News 11 for the latest on this breaking story. We now resume our regular program schedule.
Live. An uprising this weekend in North Toledo. Protesters rioted in the streets, canceling the march and enacting a citywide curfew. Now we look at the aftermath that shook this North Toledo neighborhood. Plus, a South Toledo man is rushed to the hospital after being shot in his apartment. Now the search is on for the trigger man. There was a body found in the Maumee River. The mystery of a missing man is revealed. And a major milestone for the I-280 bridge, how they're topping everything off.
First, fast, fair. Fox Toledo News, First at 4, starts right now.
First at 4, city leaders say there has been no new violence after a riot broke out Saturday in North Toledo. 114 people were arrested and a dozen police officers injured as the melee broke out at the same time a planned neo-Nazi march was called off. Fox Toledo's Heather Miller's been working this story for us. She is live at Government Center with the latest. Heather?
Well, the state of emergency has been lifted for Toledo. That means there will be no citywide curfew for tonight. Now, this was just announced just a little bit ago by Mayor Jack Ford during a press conference where he cited 2 days of relative quiet. Now, of course, you can take a look at this video. It was an entirely different story on Saturday. That was when an all-out riot erupted in North Toledo. Today, court appearances began for the 100-plus that were arrested during the melee. More arrests are expected as police review news footage like this of the riot. Meanwhile, Mayor Jack Ford says it is time to look forward and begin to heal.
This may well be an opportunity to not only turn the page on what was an ugly afternoon, but an opportunity to really embrace some in that community who heretofore had not had a full chance to do the kind of things they want to do in life.
Now, the city is pledging to help home and business owners make repairs when their homes were attacked during those riots. That also includes the bar that was looted and set on fire. One more thing, the police say that later this week they're expecting to announce a Crime Stopper reward that leads to the arrest of those people who did break into that bar and set it on fire. They want to get those people caught. For now, reporting live at Government Center in downtown Toledo, Heather Miller, Fox Toledo News, First at 4.
Mayoral candidate Cardi Finkbeiner calls the looting and vandalism after the riot Saturday unacceptable. He says there is something the city can do about it. The former mayor called a news conference this morning to talk about what he calls a sad day in Toledo history. Finkbeiner's urging prosecutors to review tape and prosecute riot offenders to the fullest extent of the law. He's also recommending a gang task force be formed, combining city, county, and federal resources.
I want public safety officials to arrest and remove from the scene that individual or gang of individuals before a brick is thrown, a Molotov cocktail is hurled, or a shot is fired.
Cardi says a gang task force the city had in place from September of 1994 to 2001 was successful. One family thought to be at the center of this North Toledo uprising is speaking out today. Tom Schick says he and his family are being accused of bringing Saturday's violence to Toledo. Our Allison Brown continues our Team Fox coverage now with that story. Allison.
Well, Laura, Tom says this just isn't the case and he had nothing to do with the riot, no matter what the neighborhood and police are saying.
Tom Schick and his family say Toledoans are just looking for someone to blame for Saturday's North Toledo uprising.
I'm just trying to find out where, the chief is getting his information from.
At a press conference yesterday, Chief Mike Navarre addressed the many complaints Tom Schick has made to police in the past months about gang problems in his North Toledo neighborhood.
A lot of his complaints were the catalyst for this march yesterday.
But Tom says he didn't know the violence would hit so hard.
I'm thinking, okay, they're just joking, There's no way somebody could have broke all the windows. Sure enough, I pulled up in front of the house, and there was, you wouldn't believe the litter, the debris, the beer bottles, the broken glass that was everywhere.
But Chief Navarre has a different story as to who invited the Nazis to Toledo.
We have information that they were contacted by his brother.
I don't think he could have, no. My understanding is the Nazis came through the neighborhood. They let themselves be known as just an organization that was forming in Toledo, and they wanted to know about the gang activity. Then after they resembled themselves that they were from the neo-Nazis, that's when my dad said, get out. That's when he told me, get off the porch because I don't believe in your philosophy.
Now, we did talk to James Schick off camera, and he says he has no comment to the allegations because he just wants the whole thing to die. Reporting live, Allison Brown, Fox Toledo News, first at 4.
Gang members are letting their frustrations out about what happened Saturday. Mayor Jack Ford says they did most of the rioting in North Toledo. One gang member we spoke with says police were unfairly protecting the Nazis instead of the protesters. Brad, as he calls himself, says he thinks the city should have done everything in its power to keep the Nazis away from North Toledo.
Now we're mad at the police because they protecting them. They protecting, they tear gassing us and, hey, shooting us with rubber bullets and what we were supposed to do.
The city says it could not stop the Nazis from marching on the sidewalks because that would have been a violation of their rights. Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur grew up in North Toledo, and she says the riots should be a learning experience for everyone. Kaptur attended Mass at St. Hedwig's in the Polish Village. She says Saturday's uprising is unfortunate, and now it's time for the community to come together.
To hear from residents, businesses, religious leaders, citizens who want to come forward, youth groups, about their concerns and suggestions for the future.
Kaptur says she plans to hold several informal hearings in the North End to get a feel for the problems and solutions in the area. Education First. Woodward Schools has a few extra officers on hand today. They were there to handle any incidents which might result from this past weekend's eruption. At least 3 students were taken into custody for reasons unknown. TPS says anyone who participated in the riots will be suspended. Right now, police need your help in catching the rioters who hit this American Petroleum gas station. Police say a group broke down windows and damaged property. They also stole the money out of the register and merchandise. Police were able to nab one of the felons, or suspected felons, as he was getting away. If you have any information, you are asked to call Crime Stopper. A fight between 2 men ends in gunfire. It happened in the middle of the day today with small children nearby. Fox Toledo's Ronnie Dahl is on this story. She joins us now live from the news desk. Ronnie?
Well, Toledo detectives are still trying to piece this one together.
There are people that belong to gangs. Yes, there are. They call themselves belonging to gangs.
There's a gang problem in the city of Toledo.
Toledo Police Chief Mike Navarre says gangs were only part of the issue on Saturday. In fact, Navarre claims police have made strides since January when he developed the gang suppression unit. Formerly undercover officers were put in uniform, and the result has been the arrest of almost 800 known gang members so far this year. But after Saturday, Navarre's boss, Mayor Jack Ford, says there's still more work to be done.
Gangs, per se, now is going to get a renewed focus because of what happened at that intersection. And
Yeah, in fact, the gang suppression unit is about to get larger. Now, currently there are 6 officers assigned to that unit. Chief Mike Navarre had planned on growing here coming up
next year. He wanted the unit to add some forces once the new police class goes into effect next year. However, Jerry, based on what we saw this weekend, the chief says the time to grow that gang task force is now. He wants to add a couple of officers by the end of this year. We're talking a couple of months here.
Former mayor and now candidate Cardi Finkbeiner, he says the gang unit, we've got another political issue heading into the fall campaign.
It is becoming a very political issue here, Jerry. Cardi Finkbeiner is saying that we need to combine forces here, the city, the county, and the federal government. Combine forces on that gang suppression unit, similar to what was done when he was mayor. Now, we should point out there is a member of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Unit, the federal government.
Federal agency, yeah.
Exactly. However, there's nobody from the sheriff's office, nobody from the county like a sheriff's deputy. Cardi Finkbeiner says there needs to be.
We should probably talk to Police Chief Mike Navarre about that. And
That's
we
a
will,
good idea.
coming up in News Talk. The chief joins us live today to take your questions. He's going to sit in the hot seat. He has not ducked anything all weekend. There's the number to call, 419-255-1118. Come on, you've been harboring it, you've been thinking it. Get it off your chest and say it. Join us for News Talk today. Earlier in News 11 at 5, it was raining here, and we said that it kind of rekindled the smell of smoke. It'll do that in a place that has been burned, and in, let's face it, the sidewalk covering with ashes. But I can tell you that the rain has stopped. It's actually looking a little brighter in this neighborhood. We know weather-wise. We hope in other ways as well. Let's get the latest Futurecast now. Here's Robert Shields with the latest.
We have just very widely scattered light rain showers out there, and you can see the trailing edge already coming through the city of Toledo and down through parts of Fulton and Putnam counties. There is still some rain falling. It will come to an end pretty quickly. It's only very light, so take the umbrella with you if you're heading out to dinner. Right now, temperatures starting to cool off a little bit thanks to that rain. Upper 50s are our current readings, and our Futurecast shows the rain moving out very quickly tonight. You'll wake up tomorrow to some sunshine. It's going to be a breezy day, but very comfortable with high temperatures up into the 60s. Wednesday, we'll expect highs in the 60s again, but we're also going to be looking at a chance of showers. Again, they should be very light during the day on Wednesday, but there will be a chance, and there will be less sunshine than you can expect tomorrow. Scattered light rain showers tonight, the low 46. Tomorrow, 64 for the high temperature with partly sunny skies. 67 on Wednesday with a chance of a shower. 63 Thursday. Friday, a good chance of rain with a high around 60, and highs should be in the upper 50s for the upcoming weekend for you. Here's our Hanson's Windows weather quiz today. In the last 100 years, which half of the United States has warmed the most? The western U.S. or the eastern U.S.? And the correct answer here is the western United States. A. And our winner today is from Toledo, Robin Warren. Congratulations. We'll be back again tomorrow with another weather quiz question for you.
All right, congratulations, and thanks so very much, Bobby. When we come back, we're going to open the phone lines. It is News Talk time, people, 419-255-1118. The police chief of the city of Toledo, Mike Navarre, joins us live to News Talk with you. Stay with us here on News 11 at 5.
Every day, News 11 is working harder, taking on problems in our community.
News 11 went to bat for
asking the tough questions.
We asked the police chief and other officials.
Demanding
Is there a
answers.
problem
of gang activity?
Taking action, getting results. Count on WTOL News 11.
Hi, I'm Brian Elias, president of 800 Hansons. When you need new windows, call 800 Hansons. Bays, bows, garden windows, it's 800 Hansons. How about a new patio door for your home? It's 800 Hansons. You need new siding, you need gutter protection, that's right, for the best prices in town on windows, siding, or gutter protection. Get it done better, get it done for less. It's 800 Hansons.
Call 1-800-HANSON. Get it done.
My favorite time of the year is when prices fall.
It's time to rake in the savings at Furniture Row's Fall Clearance Sale. We've taken huge markdowns in every store to clear out overstocked, discontinued, and one-of-a-kind merchandise. And these extra discounts are on top of our 200% guaranteed lowest price pledge. We're also offering no payments and no interest for 1 year. Furniture Row Shopping Center, centered around you. Drop by. Our fall clearance sale ends soon.
Introducing the Total Value Promise.
From the award-winning quality of Buick. I promise.
I promise to stand behind your Buick.
With our 4-year, 50,000-mile new vehicle warranty.
And the serenity of a quiet-tuned interior.
I promise you the security of OnStar on new 2006 Buick models.
It's our Buick Total Value Promise to you.
Lease a new 2006 LaCrosse CX for as low as $259 per month. Call for details. See your select Buick dealer.
Hi.
Our pediatrician asked us to have our daughter checked.
Oh, take a number. Number 5.
Worried it will take hours to see a doctor in the emergency room?
77.
At St. Anne and St. Charles Mercy Hospitals, we believe in treating emergencies like emergencies. We promise a doctor will see you in 30 minutes or less.
Number 6, please.
Yes. The 30-minute ER promise. Care you can believe in.
We're waiting for your call. Dial now for News Talk on News 11 at 5.
If you've been around the city of Toledo long enough, you'll remember the race riots of the 60s. You remember a great deal of civil unrest, fires all over the city during a municipal workers' strike of the 70s. But it's been nigh unto 3 decades since we've seen the kind of scenes we saw this weekend in this neighborhood here in North Toledo. How did the police department handle, first of all, the visit, if you will, the protest, if you will, by this group of neo-Nazis who came to this neighborhood to decry what they claim is black on white crime in this neighborhood? And then when things got ugly, how did the police department respond in your mind? Why don't you join us at 255-1118. Police Chief Mike Navarre is with us in studio today. Chief, I know it's been a heck of a haul here. For those of us who've covered news for 3 decades or so, you know we've been out on a lot of stuff with you guys, and most of us couldn't and wouldn't wear the uniform and the badge. But you guys are sworn to uphold the law. You have a job to do. You do accept that. First thing I want to ask you about is that scene of your people, men and women in riot gear, escorting these Nazis with their hate message. Almost the image is almost like we're going to protect them and they get to say whatever they want to. And some say, I understand why the residents got upset at that. Could you have done something differently there? And should you have?
Certainly our job was to protect everyone out there, not only the neo-Nazis that chose to protest in our city, the counter-protesters that came, and certainly all the residents that live in that neighborhood. We could not pick and choose and discriminate. Our job is to make sure that everyone gets through that incident safely.
Some people have also expressed concerns as they've looked back at the videotape, looked at the timeline of this thing. There seemed to be a period of time when things appeared to be getting ugly that the police, if not retreat, kind of fell back a little bit, and we're told, it's been reported, negotiations were going on. With whom do you negotiate at a time like that when you have hundreds of angry people who are being told that their race is second class? What negotiations are there at a time like that? Should you not have been more aggressive at that time?
Well, the officers attempted as best they could for several hours to disperse this crowd. The crowd was growing, they were becoming more angry, and there was a real possibility that there was going to be some serious injury to officers. We simply did not have enough reinforcements on hand, and we had to call for backup. And once the reinforcements arrived, we put in a plan in place where we would come in from all 4 directions and try to arrest as many of these individuals as we can. There was an attempt, while we were waiting for those reinforcements, to negotiate to try to get these individuals to leave peacefully. That is always preferred in any type of situation. We do that with hostage situations, and that, of course, did not work on Saturday, and it was necessary for us to go in with full force and arrest en masse.
All right. Chief, a lot of our viewers want to talk with you, and Pat's going to lead us off on News Talk today. Pat, go ahead. You're on with Chief Mike Navarre.
Hello. I'm just calling because I'm curious to why all of a sudden it seems like everybody's surprised that there's such a problem in the North End. There's been a problem in the North End for a long time, and unrest and gangs, and I feel that the police have overlooked what's going on in the North End. I feel sorry for the people, the Polish people down there, the Mexicans. I mean, my grandson was murdered down there in the summertime, and I think if there was more gang task force, this
all right, let's let the chief answer it. The question is, and let's face it, those of us who live in the city know that there are problems up here. Chief, have the police been too lax, have not done enough in this neighborhood? Look the other way, possibly?
Well, there's problems in every area of the city. We have tough areas. There's no question about that. The problems that were being reported in these 2 particular blocks were highly exaggerated. That is a relatively quiet neighborhood, and if you go down there and talk to the residents, the vast majority will tell you the same thing. And you talk about the gang task force. Crime in this city cannot fall on the shoulders of 5 or 6 individuals. It's the responsibility of every member of the police department, and it's the responsibility of the community to lend their assistance when they can.
All right, thanks so very much. Here's Tasha next on the News Talk phone line. Tasha, how are you?
I'm fine.
What do you have for us today?
I just wanted to say, like the first caller said, it's been a problem over in the North End. And the second thing I got to say is that's what the community been wanting to do to the police. That's why the police got attacked so severe, because that's what everybody been wanting to do to them, because they harass people. You can't even walk down